Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Monday, September the 15th, 2025. So last week we had the drama with Charlie Kirk, and I did look at his horoscope and the time of his shooting. And I do want to sort of revisit the event. There were a few aspects that I hadn't fully considered. I'm particularly interested in the fact that there was a Uranus sextile Neptune at the time of this assassination, given how important the assassination has turned out to be. And additionally, Saturn had just gone back into Pisces, and that might tell us quite a lot about the sort of cultural wars that we're currently experiencing. And then there's a horoscope of the suspect. Well, this is a problem because there has been a chart that has been looked at. There is a date that some people have mentioned, and they've looked at it astrologically, but I haven't really seen any confirmation. So I'm not convinced that we know the horoscope of, or at least we know the date. I'm not convinced that we know the date of birth of the suspect. Nonetheless, I want to look at the date that has been fairly widely circulated on the internet and ask, whether this date of birth of a suspect is plausible. But before I do all that, I want to consider the astrology and I Ching of today, which is Monday, September the 15th, 2025. So here is the chart for today. Don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. So the moon at noon New York time is at 8 degrees 56 Cancer at the beginning of this week today, Monday. And so the moon moved into Cancer at 1:30 in the morning London time. So that means that if you're in Australasia, the moon won't move into Cancer until sort of late morning. So, overall, I think we can say that the moon is indeed in Cancer, and as it moved into Cancer, it makes a square to Neptune. So you might say that is, the main lunar aspect, moon square Neptune. I mean, having made that square with Moon and Neptune, well, it doesn't do a great deal else until sort of later in the sign in terms of major aspects. So lunar activity is relatively low, though Moon in Cancer is in the same sign as Jupiter. Moon is applying to a conjunction of Jupiter. And so you could say that the moon and Jupiter, are not just in the same sign; that they're in a kind of a mixed reception. The moon is in the exaltation of Jupiter. Jupiter is in the sign of the moon. So there is a good relationship between the moon and Jupiter. So I think we can regard there as being a Moon-Jupiter conjunction, although it won't be until tomorrow that conjunction becomes exact. And aside from that, there are two biquintiles. We've got Venus is biquintile Neptune, so Venus 144 degrees to Neptune, and Mars is biquintile Uranus. Venus biquintile Neptune, it's a bit vague. I mean, it's perhaps, what we are trying to create, the kind of style we're trying to create as well. Perhaps some of us are trying deliberately to be nebulous and, not give everything away. Venus biquintile Neptune, though if we wanted to use Venus biquintile Neptune in the most positive sense, I'd probably suggest that you look at it from an artistic perspective rather, for example, than about relationships. Venus biquintile Neptune might be about trying to create an effect. That might be about painting a picture, writing a poem. Of course, writing a poem is always a problem now with ChatGPT, that can write perfect sonnets in a second. But still, make an effort to be artistic and creative and to sort of bring something down from the cosmos. But then there is Mars biquintile Uranus, and that is a very different energy. And the Mars-Uranus pairing can be quite violent, and some of us might be sort of deliberately trying to be violent. I remember long ago I went to it was an evangelical church service. I don't go to church services by and large. It's not that I'm an atheist. I don't, or am I a Christian? Well, does it depend on what depends on which day it is? But I went to this church service, and the reason I went is because there was someone giving a talk on astrology. Of course, it was quite a hostile talk on astrology, but I sat through this 2-hour church service, and it was not good. I mean, I didn't enjoy myself, and the first hymn is here. I don't even know hymn is the right word. Song. So everyone had to stand up and sing a song, and then at the end of the song, the pastor told everyone to do the whole thing again, because it wasn't violent enough. Because as Christians, we have to be violent, and so violence can mean different things. And so Mars biquintile Uranus can be saying, we have to be more violent. And violence doesn't mean attacking or killing people. It's just being perhaps more aggressive, more sort of in your face. And so with Mars biquintile Uranus, some of us might feel that that's how we have to behave. We have to sort of turn up the volume and make a special effort to be more assertive. But if it's not us, it might be other people. So some people might be picking up on this Mars biquintile Uranus. And so if you see someone behaving in a rather aggressive way, that's not necessarily their real character, their real personality. It might be that they're just trying too hard. So that's the picture, with a chart set for New York. And if we set that same chart, same day for noon in Sydney, Australia, so you can see that at noon, Sydney, Australia, the moon is in Cancer. So if you are in Australasia, the morning could be different from the afternoon and evening. The moon in the sort of afternoon and evening, sort of late Gemini. Perhaps you'll be picking up on a square between the moon and Saturn. And so if you are in Australasia, the day might start off on quite an uncertain note. But I think that once the moon does move into Cancer in the last part of the day, things should get better. And then there is the heliocentric view, putting the sun at the center of the solar system. We still had that Venus-Jupiter conjunction. It's taking a long time to separate. So there is the sort of the good fortune of that Venus-Jupiter conjunction. At a time when we've also got the moon in Cancer moving towards a conjunction to Jupiter. So for many of us, it may not be such a bad day. It could be a day when there is sort of less pressure than usual. Additionally, Venus is making a trine to Mars. So, Venus trine Mars is a classic aspect of attraction. And so there is a way to attract. There are things people are looking for, things people want, and perhaps we can provide it. And there are certainly ways to be attractive. I mean, not necessarily the usual ways. We have to think about this in a fairly cosmic way. This is a heliocentric chart. And so, at the moment, people have particular interests and particular things they find attractive, and perhaps with Venus trine Mars, that's something we might want to discover or at least think about. Though, Venus trine Mars can be about people trying to get our attention, not just people, organizations, the media, trying to get our attention, trying to sort of wrap us up in something that seems appealing, but it might be lies. It might just be propaganda. So that's the overall picture. Not a lot going on today. astrologically, at least on paper. Moon square Neptune, you could say, is the main aspect. Well, you could also say that the moon is applying to a conjunction of Jupiter, which I think is a pretty something that is pretty fortunate. So let me now look at the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Monday, September the 15th, 2025. Aries. There is a slow conjunction between the moon and Jupiter. So, with the moon slowly moving towards Jupiter, okay, I'm not saying that it's necessarily moving relatively slowly. It's just that moon-Jupiter conjunction is some way off, and that moon-Jupiter conjunction is not exact today. But I think that this aspect is going to be quite helpful to you, Aries. It can ground you, it can make you feel comfortable, and it might take the pressure off. Sometimes you do feel that you absolutely have to do something, that you can't avoid it, that now might be the moment that you have to do something dramatic. No, that might all be the case, but the key thing is that you are feeling happy, comfortable, secure. You know what's going on at the most basic level. And so the Moon-Jupiter conjunction really does help anchor you. And perhaps it allows you to think about other things. I mean, it's not just that you want to sit around at home doing nothing. That is not true. But I think that you need to know that you are being looked after. And I think that you can know that you are being looked after. Now, at the same time, you are not complacent, not at all complacent, Aries. You really want things to be better for yourself, and you know they could be better. And I think, Aries, if you make the effort in a balanced way, this is not a day when you want to sort of cause huge amounts of disruption, where you have to change plans. It's not what it's about, Aries. It's about just doing things, systematically, deciding perhaps where your weak points are, perhaps areas that you don't know enough about, skills that could be fine-tuned, and you can really go for all of that. And at the same time, you can attract attention without necessarily having to try too hard. Now, there are a couple of reasons for that. There is heliocentrically, not geocentrically, but heliocentrically, there is a trine between Venus and Mars. There is also a sextile between Venus and Mars. Now, that Venus-Mars sextile I don't think is exact until tomorrow. I mean, it might be exact this evening if it's perhaps if you're in the Americas. Let me just check that sextile. I should have looked it up beforehand, but. So sextile between Venus and Mars, that's certainly good news. I mean, you can see that they're really close. And the sextile is exact. I make it at London time at 4:04 Tuesday morning. So yeah, if you're in the Americas, then late this evening, there is an exact Venus-Mars sextile. But it doesn't matter whether it's exact today or tomorrow. It's there. And that Venus sextile Mars, combined with Venus trine Mars heliocentrically, potentially gives you, a lot of charisma. People are really going to notice you. And, if you want to get people's attention, if you want to impress them, now might be a good opportunity to do it. But you don't have to go out of your way. Today is not a day for going out of your way, feeling you have to do things completely differently. Though still you might. I mean, Mars is moving towards an opposition with Chiron. And that Mars opposition Chiron could be restless, feeling that you have to get attention, feeling that you have to get noticed. And you could say that there's a contradiction between Mars opposition Chiron and Moon conjunct Jupiter. Mars opposition Chiron can be disruptive. I mean, it's perhaps about feeling you have to do something to change the flow of things, because other people are complacent. But on the other hand, with Moon conjunct Jupiter, you want to be happy and you want to be secure, and you can be happy and secure. So perhaps, Aries, you need to sort of get the balance right. You can look after yourself, making sure that you don't stray too far from home ground, but also you can do something that is outstanding, different, maybe disruptive, not for your life, but perhaps for other people's lives. Some people do need disruption. They are complacent. They think that everything is fine, and when it's not necessarily fine. And you can do something, or perhaps say something, that reminds them that they need to take another approach. Taurus. It's nice that the Moon is making a conjunction to Jupiter. This conjunction. It's exact tomorrow, but I think we're all starting to feel it. And you as a Taurus, you're perhaps enjoying the Moon now that it's in Cancer. It's a great place for the Moon to be in. Not just because the Moon is in its own sign, but it's in the third house from Taurus, and of course the Moon joys in the third house. So whatever you're doing, you can feel good about it, and you can enjoy yourself in a gentle kind of way, and you can sort of relax, do things that make you happy, and there can be good conversation. Although Moon is making a square to Neptune, so with Moon square Neptune, you don't have to say everything that you think. Sometimes you might get things mixed up with Moon square Neptune, and you might sort of jump to conclusions and say something that might not necessarily be advisable. But the fact that the Moon is making a conjunction to Jupiter, the Moon and Jupiter are in the same sign, both in Cancer, and so that, to my mind, looks pretty good. And it's not exciting in itself. It's not overly dramatic, but the main thing is, Taurus, is that you feel comfortable. Now, there is today a sextile between Venus and Mars. Now, this Venus-Mars sextile will be exact this evening if you're in the Americas. It will be exact tomorrow if you're in Europe or Asia, Australasia. But it's pretty close. And heliocentrically, there is a trine between Venus-Mars. There's a lot of Venus-Mars energy today. And so, Venus is your ruler. Venus... because it's aspecting Mars, that gives you charm, and it gives you charisma, and there's nothing really that you have to do. It's not about trying to be someone you're not. That can be the trap some people fall into. They feel that they have to pretend to be someone else. They have to make a special effort to think about where they are, what they're wearing, what they're saying. But it's not about that. It's all very sort of genuine and down to earth. You can be yourself in your own space. You're not compromising. You're a Taurus. You shouldn't compromise. You should do things your way. And so that Venus sextile Mars, as far as I'm concerned, it just works very naturally for you. And so you'll find that people are just going to naturally sort of gravitate towards you, and whatever you're trying to achieve. So it might be, Taurus, that there are things you want to do, there are things you want to accomplish, and it might be very particular to you. You might have a particular idea about how you want things done. And I think that in most cases, people are going to sort of naturally gravitate towards it all. And I don't think that you're going to have to pressurize anyone. So whatever your vision is, you can make it happen. And it's not just a sort of a material vision. It can also be an artistic vision. Venus is biquintile Neptune. So Taurus, if there's anything you want to create of an artistic nature, and you want to sort of do something quite sort of otherworldly, then Taurus, I do think that you can. Gemini. Now, Gemini, you shouldn't forget that Mercury is moving into the sort of last 5 degrees of Virgo. So Mercury is already in the last decan of Virgo, but now it's in the last half of that decan. So there's only 5 degrees left before Mercury moves into Libra. And so that means that you've got sort of another few days, and then Mercury moves into Libra. Now, Mercury moving into Libra, I mean, I'll be talking about it later, in a few days' time. But Mercury moving into Libra, in many respects, for you, Gemini, is a good thing. Libra is not a bad place for Mercury to be, but also Virgo right now is not a bad place. Mercury is in its own sign in Virgo, and so over the next few days, Gemini, perhaps you need to just make sure that you can really take advantage of Mercury in Virgo. There might be things that you need to do at quite a basic level. Maybe around the home, or things connected with your family. Maybe you've been meaning to talk to a member of your family, and you just haven't got it together. You're always going to wait until tomorrow, or perhaps there's something that needs to be discussed, something you need to clarify, and now perhaps might be the time to do it. Particularly as Mercury is now pulling away from the Sun. So we had an exact conjunction between the Mercury and the Sun over the weekend, and that could have been a bit overwhelming. But now that the Mercury is moving away from that conjunction of the Sun, you've kind of got room to think. And aside from that, Gemini, you are, I think, quite appealing today. Yeah, there is something appealing. I mean, a lot of people are appealing today. I mean, I'm not just saying this to you, and it is because there is a Venus-Mars sextile, but Mercury is on the Venus-Mars midpoint. I mean, you can see this. I mean, here is Venus at 25 Leo. Here's Mercury at 25 Virgo. There's Mars at 25 Libra. So Mercury on the Venus-Mars midpoint. And, that says something about, the way you speak, the way you express yourself. And it's all very pleasant. It's charming. And you do have a way with words. And so if there's someone you want to persuade, attract, or influence with this Mercury on the Venus-Mars midpoint, I think you really can do it. And you can do it in quite a down-to-earth way. You don't have to be over the top. You just have to be reasonable. Stick to what you know. There's no need to play games. Just point things out and be authentic. And I think that in most cases you're going to get your way, and you don't have to make a big fuss about it. And aside from that, we do have the beginnings of a conjunction between the Moon and Jupiter. I mean, that Moon-Jupiter conjunction, it's exact tomorrow, but it's still moving in that direction. Moon is in Cancer, Jupiter is in Cancer, and that aspect indicates to me that you could be sort of luckier than usual, especially when it comes to money. Cancer is the sign following Gemini, so it does say something about your resources. And as far as relationships are concerned, I've already said that you are charming, and like many people, you're charming, but your words are very effective, and so because of the way you express yourself, people are going to like you, and this may say something about existing relationships. So if there's been recent misunderstandings, you'll know what to say, and that's very much in the nature of being a Gemini. But you're not going to be talking complete nonsense. You'll know that certain things are important, but another person regards them as being important, and you'll be able to discuss them in a way that is sensitive, and you'll know which details are important. So overall, Gemini, it looks like being a good day. I think you're going to be quite grounded, but also someone who will be noticed, and I think that you will be noticed for all the right reasons. Cancer, the moon doesn't do a great deal today. I mean, it does make a square to Neptune, and that square to Neptune probably strongest at the beginning of the day, and moon square Neptune can be a problem. It might mean that you're somewhat unsure of yourself, not for long, but as the moon goes into Cancer, as it makes a square to Neptune. I mean, don't forget, the moon just before it moved into Cancer, it was making a square to Saturn. So the moon was kind of on the squaring the Saturn-Neptune midpoint. So there could be moments of uncertainty, especially at the beginning of the day, when you're not quite sure who you are and where you're going to, and it might not be clear, exactly, what you should be doing next, and in terms of, your sense of direction. And there is some confusion there at first. And of course, it is Monday, first day of a week, if you regard Monday as the first day of a week rather than Sunday, the beginning of a working week. So if you're working, then you go into work Monday morning, you might not be sure what's happening. Maybe no one's sure what's happening, but it's just a passing phase. And the moon, as it progresses through Cancer, starts to make a conjunction to Jupiter. Now, that moon-Jupiter conjunction is not exact until tomorrow, but the moon and Jupiter, they're 12 degrees apart, something like that. It's 12 degrees apart noon New York time. So it might be a bit further out if you're somewhere else in Europe or Asia or Australasia, but it's getting there. By tomorrow, that Moon-Jupiter conjunction will be exact. And anyway, Moon and Jupiter are both in Cancer, both in your sign, in mixed reception. Moon is in Jupiter's exaltation sign. Jupiter is in the Moon's sign of rulership. So overall, that connection strikes me as being, pretty fortunate. You can present yourself very well, and I think that people are going to respond to you very well, and with sympathy. When I say sympathy, I'm not talking about sympathy in a bad sense, just being sympathetic to your point of view, in the same way that you can be sympathetic to other people's points of view. And you might sort of come over as someone who is, quite nurturing, that you can sort of, if need be, if you want to, you can sort of wrap people up in a bit of an emotional blanket there with the Moon and Jupiter in Cancer, and because it just allows you to project who you are, what you are. And so I think that overall, Cancer, I don't really want to say too much. I think that as the day progresses, that Moon-Jupiter conjunction just gets closer and closer, and that is the aspect that matters. So as the day progresses, I think that you become more and more comfortable, and also sort of more and more fortunate. Leo, a good day. I mean, it can be a good day, I think. You're feeling relatively optimistic. You feel that things are working out, that things are slowly going your way, but you don't have to do anything about it. I think that most Leos are going to be just comfortable where they are. You don't have to go anywhere. And if you want to just drift around a bit, that's not necessarily such a bad thing. I mean, there is a square between the Moon and Neptune, and this Moon-Neptune square, might encourage you to sort of drift off, moving from one idea to another, not always being particularly realistic, and that's probably okay, provided you're not doing anything that is really critical or that relates to the real world. So if you want to drift and think and fantasize, then yeah, go ahead, provided it's not just interrupting anything important. And so you can be fortunate without having to necessarily apply yourself. You can sort of hold back, and if you feel you're being ignored, well, don't worry about it. It's through choice. I mean, I think that some Leos today are just not really going to want much in the way of social connections. I mean, it's just not perhaps going to be important to you. On the other hand, Leo, if you feel lonely, or if you feel that you need real attention from sort of real people, then that's definitely an option available to you. Venus is still in Leo. It's going to go into Virgo soon enough, so perhaps you could say, well, enjoy Venus in Leo while it lasts. This is very much the tail end of the Leo season, this last planet in your sign. And yeah, it's still there. I think off the top of my head that Venus moves into Virgo on the 22nd, isn't it? Something like that. So there's 22nd. That seems a bit late. I should tell you, when does Venus move into Virgo? That is a good question. Venus moves into Virgo. Sorry, the 19th. Oh, that's closer than I thought. So you've got about 4 days left of Venus in Leo. So Venus in Leo is about how you present yourself, and Venus is making a sextile to Mars. So Leo, with this Venus sextile Mars, if you want to get on with people, if you want to be with people, you want to attract people, then you certainly can, and you're able to communicate with a quiet enthusiasm that I think that will very much be appreciated. If that's what you want to do, and if you want to sort of move from one place to another, again, you can. I mean, it's not a day for the large journeys, but if you want to visit someone, visit a place, then I think the whole thing can work sort of quite well. But just bear in mind where your priorities are, your deeper inner emotional priorities. And I think that you are going to value your own space, and if you're having to sort of deal with lots of different people, yeah, you'll be effective. You'll know how to get their attention, but it may not be you, and it might just be too exhausting. So make sure that you do look after yourself and you don't overdo it. And it just could be that there could be today sort of blasts of sort of intense energy and enthusiasm where you are there and you are with people and you're encouraging them, and you just give it a brief blast. Might be just a 5-minute meeting, 5-minute phone call, and then you've done your bit, and then you can retreat. But retreat in a comfortable way, just feeling good about yourself and feeling good about the future. Virgo, do enjoy Mercury's movement, through your sign, while it lasts. Mercury is now in the last 5 degrees of your sign. It's getting ready to move into Libra, and so with Mercury in late Virgo, well, is there anything that you're trying to sort out that you perhaps haven't finished? And so that might be something you want to apply yourself to. And at the same time, Libra, it's important. Sorry, Virgo. At the same time, Virgo, it's important that you have some self-confidence. And the reason I say that is because Mercury is slowly more moving towards an opposition to Saturn. Why did I say slowly? Mercury's actually moving quite quickly at the moment. In a couple of days' time, Mercury will make an exact opposition to Saturn, and you're picking up on it already. And this Mercury opposition Saturn could say something about other people and how other people are behaving, how they're treating you, how they're responding to your ideas. And I'm afraid some people can really get you down. They can be negative and they're not encouraging. And you have to perhaps be aware of that and also be aware of how you respond. So if you are told something with Mercury opposition Saturn, you might take it at face value. You might even regard it as being the end of the world. So, not literally the end of the world, but, perhaps there's something important to you. You get some feedback. You listen to someone's response to you, and it doesn't seem great. You pick up on another person's negativity. And, yeah, that could get you down. But you have to remember that it's just an outside opinion. The person that knows best, Virgo, is probably you. Mercury, after all, is in Virgo. It's in its own sign. Mercury is quite strong in Virgo, especially if you're a Virgo. And it's moving away from the conjunction to a sun. So, over the weekend, the Sun and Mercury were exactly conjunct, and that could have been a bit much, and it might have been difficult for you to work out what was going on, what was going to happen next. But now that Mercury is moving away from the Sun, you're perhaps able to be sort of more objective. And additionally, Mercury is moving onto the Venus-Mars midpoint. So you can absolutely see this by eye. Midpoints can sometimes be difficult to spot, particularly if you're looking at squares, oppositions, semi-squares, sesquiquadrates to midpoints. But this midpoint is easy because you've got Venus at 25 Leo, you've got Mars at 25 Libra, and you've got Mercury at 25 Virgo. So you can see by eye that Mercury is exactly on the Venus-Mars midpoint. And Mercury, being in your sign, does give you a real ability to talk. Now, going back to certain people who might be discouraging, you don't have to put up with that, not at all. And you are able to communicate with, not just with power, but you're able to do it in such a way that people listen and you can draw people in. And the very words you use can give a boost to your attractiveness and your reputation. And so there's always a time for talking, and I think that words for you, Virgo, can be very powerful and very effective. And as a Virgo, you're probably very good with words. You know how to string them together. You know how to create a powerful impact. And many Virgos have a good vocabulary, and they know how to make the most of their vocabulary. And at the same time, you've got Moon starting to make a conjunction to Jupiter in Cancer. Cancer is a sign that is very sort of Virgo friendly, and that gives you a further boost. And so Virgo, don't limit yourself. It's probably not a day for going into hiding. I think that people need to know about you. They need to know what you can do, what you can offer. And if you're with people, I think that you can be very effective. And don't be modest. I mean, some Virgos can be modest, but I don't think modesty is going to do you much good. I mean, it's because it would be untrue. Because there are things that you really should not be modest about, that you need to be talking about. People need to know. And for your part, okay, you can consider your audience, and you can pay attention to the audience. You can ask yourself, who are you talking to? What are they looking for? And you can ask yourself that question, and in fact, you will know how to moderate your behavior and your words and your actions to fit in with other people's, I suppose, other people's tastes or their sensitivities. You can do that, but in the process, just don't forget who you are and how important you are, or how important you can be. Libra. Venus is your ruler, and Venus is it's in late Leo, and it is making a sextile to Mars, geocentrically, and heliocentrically. Venus is making a trine to Mars. Venus is also making a conjunction to Jupiter, and I think that these aspects are pretty good. And I think that as a Libran, at least if you're a textbook Libran, you regard the social world as being important, and you want to be friends with everyone. You want to be liked, and today with Venus sextile Mars, you certainly can be liked, and you don't have to give anything away. You can be liked for being yourself, and so there's no need to try too hard to get into other people's good books. Yeah, you can be yourself, and you will have a natural charisma. And don't forget, Mars is still in Libra, and Venus still in Leo, as I've just said. So Venus making a sextile Mars, you just get attention, and at the same time, you don't have to give very much away. So if you want to be with people, then you very much can. Now, additionally, we have a conjunction between the Moon and Jupiter. Now, this Moon-Jupiter conjunction isn't exact until tomorrow, but the moment the Moon moves into Cancer, it's the same sign as Jupiter, and now it's getting closer and closer to Jupiter. And so, with the Moon and Jupiter in Cancer, I would regard that for you, Libra, as being great. It allows you to really project who you are and what you want. Do think about what you want. It's not all about other people's needs. In fact, it's about your needs. And if there's anything that you're trying to get together, if you've got ambitions, if you've got things you want to do this week, particularly of an ambitious nature, but it could be anything, something that is important to you and how you are projecting yourself, you very much can do it, and you can do it in a way that is very effective. And I think that you're going to be lucky, and your luck is going to be especially strong in terms of of your work or your business. So if you're going into work, I think that you'll understand what's happening, and you'll know what to do, you'll know what to say, and people around you, workmates, employers, perhaps employees as well, if you have employees, they're all going to like you, and there's going to be sort of an atmosphere of cooperation. And additionally, Venus is sextile Mars, as I've just said, so that just gives you the ability to just get on with people. And this also means that as far as one-to-one relationships are concerned, that things are looking good with this Venus sextile Mars. Venus sextile Mars, these two planets representing relationships. I mean, Venus is of course a sort of archetypal female force. Mars is archetypal male, and sort of they're in sextile geocentrically, and so there's just a good relationship there. And the relationship can take many forms. I mean, it is a sextile, and being a sextile, there is a constructive element to it, and so there's a small amount of work to be done, but not a huge amount of work. And I think that with this sextile, you can put in a bit of effort into any relationship, and you will be rewarded. And additionally, it just might be that you and someone else just really are on the right wavelength, and so do take advantage of people. I mean take advantage of them in terms of ripping them off. Just take advantage of their company, make the most of their company, and see what they've got to offer. And I think you yourself have got a lot to offer. So Libra, it looks to me like a day when things really are working. Scorpio, there is a slowly forming conjunction between the Moon and Jupiter. Now, this Moon-Jupiter conjunction, it's not exact today. It is exact tomorrow. But, we do have the Moon and Jupiter, in the same sign. And, this does mean, Scorpio, that you can, move beyond things. I mean, sometimes Scorpios can get, very focused on particular obsessions. For example, it is, things might seem to be of absolutely crucial importance, and you can't focus on anything else, and you've got to just keep looking, keep concentrating. And with the Moon and moving out of Gemini into Cancer, I think that you can start to be more relaxed. You can let go and start to see, what possibilities are available. So you don't have to be tied so much to any one course of action, or even to any sort of one thought or one feeling. There is more freedom, and overall today and into tomorrow, you're getting more perspective. And because you're feeling more relaxed and more open-minded, this is naturally going to feed into how other people view you. And we do have a sextile between Venus and Mars. Mars is your ruler. It's in Libra, and there may have been times over the last month and more when you haven't really been in the mood for people socializing. It just seemed to be a waste of time, and part of you perhaps wanted to be left alone. I mean, not all the time, but there were times when you did want to be sort of left alone. But with Venus sextile Mars, you need to think about what is possible, and that other people can be there for you. Other people can be useful, in many ways, and that might apply to some of your ambitions. Venus is still moving through Leo. I mean, it won't be in Leo for much longer. I think it's I think it goes into, when does it go into Virgo? Very soon. Venus goes into Virgo on I just looked it up, on the sort of on the 19th. Venus moves into Virgo, so that's going to happen very soon. But while Venus is in Leo, while Venus is in this high profile part of your chart, do make the most of it. And it is high profile, maybe sometimes too high profile. You don't want to engage too much with certain people. You don't want all that attention, but you can benefit from contacts with certain people, perhaps in a very sort of material way. Might relate to some of your ambitions, and so you have your ambitions, but there's no point in being completely quiet about them, and just consider how you can be helped. And additionally, with this Venus sextile Mars, it's a great time for cooperation. Again, you might not want to cooperate, you might not feel that you need anyone, but you can always use the right help if it's from the right person. And so Venus sextile Mars allows you to understand another person, and more importantly perhaps for them to understand you. And perhaps there's some common cause, something you and another person are both excited about, that you can work on together. And inevitably with this Venus sextile Mars, one has to talk about it in terms of closer relationships. Does it have a romantic nature? It can have a romantic nature. And so in terms of forming new relationships, if that matters to you, then over the next couple of days, with Venus making the sextile to Mars and also Venus making a trine to Mars heliocentrically, then I would have thought that the chances are certainly better than average. That's very much what astrology is. I mean, there's always a danger with astrology that one exaggerates and one just creates too many opportunities. I mean, they're theoretical opportunities, but can they really happen in the real world? Life is not quite as exciting as some astrologers claim. But all things being equal, if there is a time when romance and love matters are looking good, well, it probably would be now, because Venus is sextile Mars. Sagittarius. At the moment, Sagittarius, the Moon and Jupiter are both in Cancer, and so this very much emphasizes the fact that you have your ruling planet Jupiter in Cancer. It's going to stay there until I think June of next year, and so this is a chance to really align yourself with Jupiter, with your ruler, and where it's trying to get you to go. And Sagittarius, this is just a reminder that some things just have to be taken seriously, and that doesn't mean there's any pain or suffering. There's nothing wrong with taking things seriously and staying in one place and deciding that you're going to really get into something in great detail. There is often a temptation with Sagittarius. Not all Sagittarians, but some Sagittarians can be tempted. They can move from sort of one thing to another. They can have blasts of obsessive activity, but it could last for years. It could happen a few years, just completely focusing on one thing, really important to them. They give it their best shot, they do a good job, but then they get bored or something happens and then they move on to something else. And that can be a cycle with some Sagittarians. I'm not saying all Sagittarians. And with Jupiter in Cancer, part of the message is to just stay where you are, look at what you've got. Don't just give up on something because it's boring, because it's too complicated, perhaps because you've been rebuffed, you didn't get enough encouragement or something like that. So Jupiter in Cancer, represents just a broad period of taking yourself seriously and seeing how well you can do in one particular endeavor. And it is a fairly long-term event, lasting until June. But now that the moon is in Cancer and is moving towards a conjunction with Cancer, makes that conjunction tomorrow, Tuesday, this perhaps really emphasizes what you should be doing. So Sagittarius, think about what is important to you at the moment, and perhaps you'll realize that maybe you haven't taken it seriously enough, and just give it your best shot, give it everything, and there's no reason why you can't accomplish a great deal in a short period of time. After all, the moon and Jupiter are in mutual reception. Sort of mixed reception. Moon is in the exaltation sign of Jupiter. Jupiter is in the sign of the moon. So that does look good, and so I don't think that you necessarily have to be here, there, and everywhere, because I just think that there are things you need to be working on, thinking about, and perfecting, on your own, and don't be afraid. Be ready to go into things at quite a deep level. I mean, that is a broad message of Jupiter in Cancer, and Jupiter does stay in Cancer for quite a long time. Now, aside from that, Mercury is still in Virgo, and Mercury is now moving into the last 5 degrees of Virgo, and so this may matter because it's saying, well, maybe you should be making sure that you're taking full advantage of Mercury's movement through Virgo. Remember, Virgo is a sign in the Sagittarian chart that is right at the top. It's very much connected with ambition. And because Mercury is Virgo is a mutable sign. Mercury is moving through it, so it is still the Virgo season, and this is a time of year when Sagittarians can be surprisingly successful, surprisingly focused. I know if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, there have been distractions over the summer, but Mercury is still in Virgo, and so over the next few days, really think things through, and don't allow yourself to be distracted. Make sure that you are positive about what you can do, and time may be of the essence. And if there are distractions, there could be, for example, things going on at home, perhaps pressure from your family. You're supposed to be somewhere else, or someone tells you you're supposed to be somewhere else, but your own priorities. And I think that you really want to really make the most of Mercury in Virgo, while it's there, and also pay some attention to what could be preventing you from achieving your ambitions, whatever those ambitions might be. I mean, it might be that there is the issue of not just practicality, but sort of regulations and codes, and what is legal. I mean, that would particularly apply from a business perspective, but it could apply in other areas. And in fact, at the moment, Sagittarius, it is a time when you can really get to grips with rules and with legislation and the diktats of bureaucrats, and that might also link with the fact that the moon and Jupiter are both in Cancer. Quite a deep sign from the perspective of Sagittarius. So don't be afraid of going into things in detail, and also going into things quickly in detail. So if you need to get in touch with the facts and the rules, then Sagittarius, you can. You can do it very easily and very effectively, and you may be able to do it with very little fear. You know that it's going to be okay. I mean, it is going to be okay, provided you have knowledge, and you're a Sagittarius. Knowledge is important, and knowledge quickly obtained. Don't just leave it until later. You need to know as much as possible, as quickly as possible, and in that way you can proceed at a good pace. Capricorn, there may be moments of confusion, especially at the beginning of the day. It might be that you're just not quite sure what's going on, and other people's feedback may be sort of less than helpful. So, if you're confused about something, your natural response might be to get some help, get another person's opinion, but that could be, worse than useless. And so, Capricorn, although other people are important, you have to take them into consideration. You mustn't necessarily trust them, not immediately. And, that is kind of in keeping with who you are, Capricorn. I think that of all the 12 signs, Capricorn is probably one of the signs which is less willing to just trust someone just for the sake of it, just on a wing and a prayer, assume everything's going to be fine. It's okay to be questioning and to be suspicious. I mean, you don't have to show your suspicions. You don't have to be unfriendly or hostile. You just have to be somewhat non-committal, and not do something on the basis of what someone says, or believe something on the basis of what they say. Though, that doesn't mean to say that you can't benefit from other people. The Moon and Jupiter are both in Cancer. The Moon and Jupiter, which is of course your opposite sign, and Moon and Jupiter are applying to a conjunction. So tomorrow, Tuesday, there's a conjunction between the Moon and Jupiter, and it's a good aspect. It's a fortunate aspect, and it allows things to develop, and maybe that's the key. Don't jump to conclusions about another person, one way or another. Just give the situation a chance to develop. And, as the Moon moves towards a conjunction to Jupiter, I think that things will become, increasingly clear. And it might be that everything crystallizes on one particular person. It becomes clear that, one particular person can perhaps, be very useful to you. And it's not just about useful, it's not nothing, but it has to be transactional. And Moon Jupiter conjunction it is in Cancer, and Cancer is of course quite sort of an emotional sign. It is the opposite sign to Capricorn in many ways. Cancer is everything that Capricorn isn't, or some of the things which Capricorn isn't. Or if you want to take a Jungian approach, Cancer can be Capricorn's shadow. That sort of the inner emotional being that somehow doesn't always want to express itself directly, or perhaps you project it onto the other, but it may allow you to sort of tune into your the emotional side of your personality. But that might take some time, and you shouldn't be in a hurry. And I don't think it is a time to be trusting. Also, Capricorn, you are slightly restless. You're of the view that something maybe needs to happen, and perhaps other people are being complacent. They're just going about their daily business, and they don't seem to see the problem. And this doesn't seem right to you. And, we have today this aspect, Mars biquintile Uranus. So Mars biquintile Uranus, Mars and Uranus, they're 144 degrees apart. And in general, this aspect can be about making a special effort to have an impact. Perhaps quite an aggressive impact. Mars and Uranus as a pair are quite sort of tumultuous. They want action. They want to often break things down. And part of you, Capricorn, is just not entirely comfortable with the status quo. And you may want to create a situation where everything changes, where you can be a rebel, where you can almost sort of destroy things. And I don't mean destroy things in a way that is completely destructive. Some things do have to be destroyed if you want to create something new. And so, Capricorn, you might almost deliberately create this situation just because it needs to be done, because things have gone far enough, and it's now time to think about the next stage. And if you're thinking about the next stage, you've got to distance yourself from the past, and that could mean destroying the past in your own way. Of course, Capricorn usually is quite a traditional sign, and the past does matter to you. Though you shouldn't forget Mao Zedong. He was a Capricorn, and Mao Zedong was really into destroying the past. He felt it had to be done. Cultural revolution and so on. So one shouldn't sort of overestimate the traditional nature of the Capricorn personality. Aquarius. do think about your own needs. Sometimes Aquarians can, just float around in the world of ideas and concepts, and in the process you might sort of lose sight of yourself. And maybe we're talking about the sort of mind-body split. The mind is active, the mind is always moving forward, but the body can sometimes be forgotten. I'm not saying that's always the case with every Aquarian, or when you look at your body, you might have sort of theoretical ideas about it, perhaps something you read, sort of concepts about the body, philosophies about the body, but today perhaps you need to just think about your body and your health and your well-being, as it is, not with any idea or theory. It's just how you feel, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and then make the attempt to just look after yourself and just do what feels naturally. I said feels naturally, not what you think is natural. There is a problem that there's too much thinking about what is right, and of course I say that as a Gemini. Of course, my brain is out of control. I mean, I'm talking about something that I don't really, I couldn't put into practice myself. But I think that theoretically, Aquarius, do really try to listen to your body, and over the next couple of days, and perhaps give yourself a break. And with the Moon and Jupiter in Cancer, both water signs, and so many Aquarians might have a sort of an affinity with water. It's not an affinity that you might just feel that might be immediately obvious to you, but I think if you are close to water, I mean, I'm not saying you go into water, but just maybe you need to have a safe distance. But if you're close to water, whether it's the sea or a lake or a river, then I think that's going to have a relaxing impact on you, and you shouldn't at the moment feel that you have to do anything. I don't think that you do. I mean, I think that many Aquarians could be restless, feeling that something absolutely has to be done, and you do have that choice. But I think that in many cases that's possibly not a choice you should take. That you should just follow the course that feels most natural and feels most healthy. So that probably applies to sort of 2/3 of you. Having said that, there are going to be some Aquarians who do feel very restless. It feels that like something has to be done, and I've already sort of kind of given you a warning that if you try to do too much, you could just exhaust yourself, and your body might complain. But maybe you've got that energy, and perhaps you can get away with it. And if you really want to, Aquarius, there's no doubt that you can cause a considerable amount of havoc, because you know that something needs to change. I mean, I would have said perhaps you should wait, but if you don't want to wait and you want to sort of impose your ideas and shake things up, then you can. It needs a bit of planning. How are you going to shake things up? What are you going to do? Well, yeah, it'll become clear soon enough, and through the power of your will, you can change everything. And it could be exhausting, not just for you, but for everyone else. But maybe it's a sacrifice that has to be taken. If things really are stuck and they're not going anywhere, people are stuck. They're stuck in the past. There's no progress. Yeah, if you want to shake things up, Aquarius, you can. But I probably recommend that you don't. Pisces. Moon is in Cancer, and it's moving towards a conjunction to Jupiter. What can be better? I mean, Jupiter is your ruler, and Moon-Jupiter conjunction, it's a great aspect, and this aspect between the Moon and Jupiter, well, it's exact tomorrow. And so in a lead up to this Moon-Jupiter conjunction, I think that you're going to be feeling pretty good about yourself, and you can sort of enjoy yourself, but in a quiet way. I don't think that you have to be overly dramatic, and if you do what feels right, then I think that you're going to be well pleased with the results, and you don't have to worry too much about other people. I mean, I've said this on sort of quite a lot recently, especially since Saturn has gone back into Pisces, into your sign. You don't have to worry about them. I mean, it is a time, Pisces, to be putting yourself first. And with the Moon and Jupiter both in Cancer, you can put your own creative needs first. There are things you enjoy, there are things you like doing, and so if that's the case, then go for it, and don't apologize. Now, as far as relationships are concerned, a reminder that Mercury is in late Virgo. So Mercury is in your opposite sign, and it's moving towards an opposition to Saturn. It's also getting ready to leave Virgo, and this Mercury opposition Saturn, okay, it's not exact today, but it perhaps goes back to what I've just been saying. You've got to do what you want, by and large. It's not a time to be listening too hard to other people and doing what you're told. But Mercury opposition Saturn might indicate a person who is trying to sort of mess with your boundaries, perhaps. That's one way of looking at it. Someone who is there, and you can't entirely ignore them. Now, I think that fundamentally you are in a stronger position than they are, even though Mercury is in Virgo, because Mercury is moving to an opposition of Saturn. That might mean that you have the ability to really block someone, stop them in their tracks, and that's what you can. So whenever you're dealing with anyone, and if someone is not behaving right, or you find them irritating, you can certainly stop them in their tracks. It's straightforward with that Mercury opposition Saturn. But is that necessarily what you should be doing? I mean, I think that you do have to give people a chance, and Mercury is not going to be in Virgo forever. Mercury, in fact, is in the last 5 degrees of this sign, and it will move into Libra, and so maybe that indicates that someone is going to be on the scene for a bit longer, and then they'll disappear. And maybe they had something to offer, they had something to contribute. And perhaps with that Mercury opposition Saturn, that indicates that you kind of scare them away, or you make them feel that they're not welcome. So do try to be open-minded when dealing with other people. Just because someone is annoying or doesn't quite fit in with your view of the world doesn't mean that you should ignore them. Maybe they have got something to say. Maybe they've got something to contribute. So, from your point of view, it might be a good idea to listen. But don't listen too hard, because, fundamentally today, is about you and, what you want to do and what you enjoy. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now it's time to look at things from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I ask the question, what is Monday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 27, which is the corners of the mouth. And corners of the mouth is a hexagram that comes up pretty regularly for some reason, and it represents what we eat, what we speak, and also what we want. And there is an association between this hexagram, the corners of the mouth, and greed. Greg Winkup, in his translation of the I Ching, he really kind of emphasizes this, because he doesn't call this hexagram the corners of a mouth, and the Wilhelm translation calls it the corners of a mouth. Greg Winkup calls it bulging cheeks. And you've got perhaps the image of a hamster that's just eaten too much, just bulging cheeks. And hence the concept of greed. We have taken on a lot, we've eaten a lot. And the question is, have we eaten too much? And the issue of greed, our greed, may be important. Now, greed is not considered to be particularly fortunate. Isn't greed one of the 7 deadly sins? I think it is. Correct me if I'm wrong. But greed is part of human nature. It's part of the human experience. We're all capable of greed, and perhaps today we should be aware of that. And we have 3 moving lines, and the bottom moving line is talking about greed, though perhaps not in a positive way, and it's also talking about jealousy. And we are aware perhaps of what other people have which we don't have, and making a contrast between what they have and what we have is a real problem as far as the I Ching is concerned. And it talks about magic tortoises. The magic tortoise in the I Ching, well, it's seen as something quite special, and I think this might represent tortoiseshell oracles, but it's also representative, the magic tortoise, of something we could have, something that we should have, but we don't necessarily have. And perhaps we can give it away or allow it to be trashed. And so in terms of how this relates to greed and envy, we can be looking at what other people have. Money, possessions, good fortune, whatever it is. And in the process, we can forget what we have. And what we don't want to do is we don't want to kill the magic tortoise. And so it's perhaps important to be self-contained and to be comfortable what we have, because it's saying, well, we've got quite a lot, and if we concentrate on what we have, if we nurture the magic tortoise, then that is how we can best look after ourselves. And we shouldn't worry about what other people have, although of course psychologically, unfortunately, there are studies which show that comfort with what one has is often relative. It's not just about what we have in a relative sense. We're thinking about what other people have got, and that, of course, is perhaps a problem of human nature. And the 4th line moves, and with the 4th line moving, there's still the theme of greed here, but it's kind of saying that greed isn't necessarily such a bad thing. Greed, we need to want things. We need to think about, the possibilities for gain, and also hanging out with the right people and making the right choices about people. How this relates to corners of the mouth. Well, corners of the mouth is kind of what we have. All of the things we have. It's not just about food. It's all these things we're trying to collect, and so we need to be quite discerning. Making sure that we have the right friends. We have friends who support our aims, and so that's something we can do today. And then finally, the last line moves, and the last line it's more of the same, and it does give an image of consuming a great deal. It's almost like the whole hexagram, the corners of the mouth, is perhaps about eating and trying to gain as much as possible. But it's saying it's kind of okay. So we can try to accumulate as much as possible. We try to bring in as much as possible, and under other circumstances it might not be the right thing to do, but today maybe it is okay. Is this about hoarding? I mean, hoarding is, of course, seen as something very negative, but maybe there are lots of things that we need to collect together, and for some reason it is the right thing to do. Now, this hexagram got 3 moving lines, and it does move. And it moves to hexagram number 16, which is contentment. And, we might reach a stage today where we start to think that, really everything is okay. We know that it's not okay. We're sort of we know that trouble is just around the corner. We can see that, but who cares? Let's just enjoy things. We've got everything. Think about the previous hexagram, the corners of a mouth. We've acquired as much as possible. We've got our plate full. Everything's okay. Let's enjoy things. Let's just concentrate on the positive. And what this hexagram is telling us is that things are not going to stay positive forever. That things are changing. And ideally, we should be preparing for the future. And preparing for future challenges, preparing for something that might not go entirely right, and we shouldn't be complacent. But I think many of us are going to be complacent, and that could be dangerous and unnecessary, really, because we think about the previous hexagram. There was a sense of hoarding. Why do you hoard? You hoard because you think that things might not be so good in the near future. And so perhaps the real reason why we were accumulating in the previous hexagram, 27, the corners of a mouth, is because at some level we knew that things weren't going to stay good forever, and we had to prepare ourselves. But then there may be just moments of having done the right thing, we start to spoil it by just being complacent, and we think, oh, actually it's okay, we're in a good position, we can stop accumulating, we can stop looking after ourselves, we can stop preparing for the future. But that would be the wrong approach, and maybe the I Ching is giving us a choice. We don't have to just be complacent and contented. We can start to actually work towards addressing this future. I mean, maybe we've gone halfway there with what we've been acquiring, but we're not 100% safe. So it's certainly not a time for complacency. And I want to finish by taking another look at the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And we do have a horoscope for a suspect, and so the suspect is Tyler Robinson, and we don't really have a clear time of birth for him. Date of birth for him. And I've looked on the internet, I've looked in sort of great detail. I really tried to find something. Maybe by the time you watch this video, his confirmed date of birth will be available. I'm sure his confirmed date of birth will be available pretty soon. And so here is a speculative date of birth. April 16th, 2003. He was certainly born in 2003, and if you look at the look at the records, he's definitely 2003. Some people are saying he's born in April 2003. I mean, I've seen 2 different dates in April mentioned for him, and so April 16th, 2003 is the one that most people have focused on. And so this really brings about my wariness of looking at this chart, because it's not just about dates of birth, times of birth. You will notice that when I look at a horoscope of, say, Vladimir Putin, I don't really look at his time of birth, and I get people saying, oh, he's definitely born at this particular time. And same with others like Narendra Modi or Imran Khan. There are times of birth for these people, but I'm not going to use them, because my concern is that if I take a chart and I go into it in great detail, I have the time of birth, the date of birth. I find all these wonderful things going on, these exact transits and directions, and it looks really good. And then later on, it's found out that or it becomes to light that I've completely got the wrong date of birth. Well, I just look like an idiot, don't I? I mean, so that's my concern. And so the question with this speculative chart for Tyler Robinson, and don't forget he is a suspect. He's in custody. That's all we know. We don't know. We have no idea whether he actually committed the crime. But the question is, does it fit? So let's ask ourselves that question. And here is someone who, if this April the 16th, 2003 is right, someone who's been arrested on an extremely serious charge. He's potentially, going to be on trial for his life. And so, he has an exact Sun-Mars square in his horoscope. So the Sun and Mars are two very angry planets. They're masculine planets. They are very willful. And so, Sun square Mars could be someone who does have a lot of anger. I mean, that would be very clear. And, Sun in Aries square Mars. Well, Aries, I know it has I know Aries as a sign has a reputation for being angry, but it's not really. Aries anger is quite quick. Aries is not a brooding sign. It just gets really annoyed about something and then it sort of moves on. If you look at the horoscopes of terrorists, I mean, a lot of them are Taurians. It's because Taurian. You think about Timothy McVeigh or Andreas Baader, or Guy Fawkes, a guy who tried to blow up the Houses of Parliament in 1605. They were Taurians. Taurians can brood. Some really don't like it, and they'll just keep brooding, and then they'll just go and do it. Whereas Aries is, they can move from one thing to another, and they don't normally sort of hang on to things, hang on to ideas and frustrations. They're able to move on. But still, I mean, Sun square Mars is quite a dramatic aspect, and also because we don't know what date he was born. April 16, 2003 is speculative, but at noon, the moon is probably in late Libra. So you could say that there's some kind of T-square going on. This is April the 16th. There was a full moon on April the 16th around then, and it was square Mars. So whatever happened, there was a full moon square Mars in the middle of April. And so that was in the middle of April 2003. So that was quite a powerful lunation, and sort of not something to take lightly. And so that's those are a few thoughts about Tyler Robinson's horoscope. But then you have what was happening to Tyler Robinson, this speculative chart at the time of Charlie Kirk's assassination. It doesn't matter, whether or not he's guilty, because I mean, regardless, he ended up getting arrested, even if he had nothing to do with the crime. And so if we so that's a comparison. But okay, well let's start off with a comparison between him and Charlie Kirk. So again, we would expect to see something, and we've got Charlie Kirk's chart in the middle, and so it is true that Charlie Kirk did have his Jupiter in Libra. Now, Jupiter is about one's ideas and what one regards as being important, and it can be quite a moral sign. A moral planet, Jupiter. And Jupiter in Libra perhaps is Charlie Kirk's ideas about society and the way things should be, Jupiter in Libra. And Mars is square Jupiter, so Mars is perhaps attacking that Jupiter. And not just Mars, it's also the Sun. Look how the Sun is... Tyler Robinson's Sun is opposition to Jupiter. Mars is square Jupiter. So it perhaps has a lot to do with Jupiter. And if we had a time of birth for Charlie Kirk, we'd have some more ideas about how that Jupiter was working. But I do think that Jupiter is a planet which can be about one's moral compass. And then of course it's in Charlie Kirk's case it was how he was expressing his moral compass and how important he thought it all was. So there is a link there. And I don't know, Chiron, Tyler Robinson's, remember, speculative chart, his Chiron conjunct Charlie Kirk's Neptune. I mean, Neptune in Capricorn might have been Charlie Kirk's vision, and Chiron could have felt wounded by Charlie Kirk's vision. I mean, that is a way of looking at it. And then there is the arrest of Tyler Robinson. So clearly a very dramatic thing, the arrest, regardless of whether or not he's guilty. And one thing about the arrest is that the arrest took place with Chiron at 26 degrees 22 Aries. So Chiron was conjunct his Sun. Chiron was square his Mars. So if you're into Chiron, you could say that this was a real Chiron event. So I didn't want to go into too much detail about this speculative chart of Tyler Robinson, because I'm not confident in it. I mean, I just don't know. But Tyler Robinson was born in 2003, and we can say some general things about 2003, even if we don't know what date he's born. And one thing that I do find interesting about 2003 is that Uranus is in Pisces. Appears to be in Pisces. Okay, I don't know when. I should have looked it up. When did Uranus go into Pisces in 2003? I should have looked this up earlier. But so at the beginning of 2003, Uranus was in Aquarius, but it went into Pisces in early March, and so from early March through to September, Uranus was in Pisces. So if he was born between March and September, it would be his placement. And of course, a lot of people are born with Uranus in Pisces. And how would you see Uranus in Pisces? Well, I think that this Uranus in Pisces, as far as I'm concerned, it does say something about this whole obsession with all of the transgender and diversity, and paying people a huge amount of attention. You've got to think about the individual's rights, even if an individual, even if it's a tiny minority. You've got to just go overboard to look after their needs, even if in the process a lot of other people get damaged. And I think that could be what Pisces is concerned. And in a moment I'll be talking further about Uranus in Pisces. So I think this whole woke times that we're living in. I mean, I know that woke is a generalization, and I know that woke has different meanings. And I think that woke was originally used by African Americans to talk about the structures of persecution, which really did exist. You had to be awake to it all. That was important, but wokeness has sort of expanded beyond that and has now just become this general sort of catchphrase for obsessions about sort of looking after people's feelings and minorities and tiny minorities, particularly like the transgender community. I'm sorry, I mean, I've said something a bit offensive there. I didn't mean to, just you've got to get the words out. But so that is, to my mind, something about Pisces. Just being overly concerned about everything and people's individual rights, and people, if someone says that something is important to them, if they want to identify as something, then you've got to listen to them. You've just got to sort of confuse everything. And sort of the clarity, this whole movement away from anything binary, like male, female. Pisces just wants to sort of go everywhere. And we shouldn't forget with Pisces that it's ruled by Jupiter, and Pisces can therefore be strangely moralistic. Jupiter is a moralistic planet. It has a strong sense of right and wrong, and it can demonize people. Pisces, I mean, it really can. I mean, and it's often said that when you look at what people are saying about the progressive left, there can be a sense of the evil, that those on the right, people like Charlie Kirk, are perceived as being evil, the forces of evil, and they have to be destroyed. I'm not saying that's necessarily my view. I'm just saying what people have said. And so that gives us an idea about how Pisces might be working. And this Uranus in Pisces may say something about a generation who, a micro generation. I mean, it's not a huge generation, but Uranus stays in a sign for around 7 years on and off. And so it can be about a generation that wants to be quite radical in the pursuit of wokeness, to put it. I know that sounds crude, but into diversity, and in particular, it seems to have focused on transgender rights and this obsession with transgender rights. And I think that one can make an association with the current transgender obsession and Pisces. And we shouldn't forget that there was a new moon on April 23rd at 0 degrees 23 Virgo. So that new moon was potentially opposition Tyler Robinson's Uranus, assuming he was born sometime between March and September. And this brings me on to something else, which is the fact that Saturn has just gone out of Aries and back into Pisces. Now, I am of the view that Saturn going into Aries, and indeed Neptune more so Neptune going into Aries, but Saturn and Neptune going into Aries probably marks the end of this sort of whole transgender obsession. I mean, it's not going to go away, but it's going to sort of die down. I think that people will have other things to be worried about, other things to be concerned about. And when Saturn and Neptune were in Pisces, and with Neptune in Pisces, because Neptune was in Pisces for a long time, that is kind of peak transgender. But now what's happening is that Saturn, having left Pisces, went into Aries, and now it's gone back. And we remember, quite recently, the sort of Irish comedian Graham Linehan. Remember how he was arrested at Heathrow Airport because his comments he'd made about transgender groups. He was arrested by 5 armed police officers, and here was his arrest. He was arrested at Heathrow. So that's his birth date, birth time. Here is his arrest. Sorry, on September the 1st. So he was arrested when Saturn was at 29 degrees 59 Pisces, and so when he got arrested, just as Saturn was going into Pisces, suddenly it has got huge media focus, and the whole transgender thing just kind of got rekindled, I think, certainly perhaps in the UK context. And now, if you look at Charlie Kirk's shooting, again, Saturn was at 20, where was Saturn? Saturn was at 2919 Pisces. So again, the whole transgender concept and transgender movement suddenly is in focus again. And so I think that while Saturn and Neptune go back through Pisces, I think it could be there may be some kind of a backlash. People are desperately trying to rekindle the past, and so this might be a time when transgender activists are going to be really pushing it. They might see that things maybe are going back in their favour. In the UK, we had the Supreme Court ruling that a woman was a woman, and so perhaps when that was when it happened, I think I'm not quite sure where Saturn was when that ruling happened. I think Saturn was in Aries, I think, when that ruling happened. But now that Saturn is going into Pisces, people are kind of there could be a backlash in the UK. Maybe the government will try to reverse that. I mean, I don't know, or municipalities, organisations will try to ignore the ruling, and then in the end, Saturn will go back into Aries, and Neptune, of course, Neptune goes into will go back into Pisces. But then in the end, Saturn and Neptune will really be in Aries, and they won't go back into Pisces. And I think that is a time when we'll be able to sort of move on from this transgender obsession. And so I think that's how I would see it. I mean, they're not going to go away entirely, but in this process of Saturn and Neptune on the cusp of Pisces and Aries, you maybe are going to see sort of extreme actions which have something to do with transgender activism. So that's one way of looking at it. There's also the Uranus-Neptune sextile, and recently I did a video on the Uranus-Neptune sextile, and the last time we had a sextile between Uranus and Neptune was in the late 1960s, and with Charlie Kirk, people have made an association between his assassination and the assassination of Bobby Kennedy. I mean, Charlie Kirk was obviously very young. He was 31, and he achieved a sort of a huge amount. Whatever you think of him, he certainly politically has achieved a huge amount. And people were saying, oh, he might have been the next president and all of this kind of thing. In the same way with Bobby Kennedy. Bobby Kennedy was, idolized by many people. Would he have become the next president? Well, I don't think he would have won the 1968 election, even if he had been not been assassinated. But I don't know whether that's the case. But here is the horoscope. Here's a chart for Bobby Kennedy's assassination. And Bobby Kennedy's assassination had a Uranus-Neptune sextile. And also the assassination of Martin Luther King, which a couple of months earlier, again, a Uranus-Neptune sextile. And so how does one see that Uranus-Neptune sextile, given that we know at the time of the Charlie Kirk assassination, there was also a Uranus-Neptune sextile. There's Uranus, there's Neptune, pretty close Uranus-Neptune sextile. And that's not what we normally associate Uranus-Neptune with. Ebertin talks about Uranus and Neptune as, the sort of elimination of a waking consciousness. But if we think about it, Uranus is a planet of drama, of revolutions, sudden action. Neptune is the planet, not just of fantasies, but of ideals, things we believe in. People believe all sorts of things. And so you put them together, it could be about doing something based on what one believes to be the case. Not just believe the case, something one regards as being very, very important, but perhaps delusional as well, Neptune. So Uranus sextile Neptune could be symbolized as assassinating someone based on the delusion. That might say something about the killers of Martin Luther King, or the man who killed Bobby Kennedy. I think it had something to do in the end with Palestine, and his ideas, delusions about Palestine motive, or perhaps delusions of Bobby Kennedy's involvement in the Middle East. And likewise with the Charlie Kirk shooting, Uranus sextile Neptune. Uranus is the shooting, and Neptune is the belief system that underlies that shooting. Now, Charlie Kirk himself may have been particularly vulnerable to the impact of the Uranus-Neptune sextile, because if you look at Charlie Kirk's horoscope, he had an exact Uranus-Neptune conjunction in his horoscope. Just a 5-minute orb. So if you've got such a close conjunction, then that might mean that you are very, very sensitive to the Uranus-Neptune cycle. So it might then just not be surprising that when Uranus and Neptune were sextile, that was a point of vulnerability. And, it has a lot to do with ideas, with Charlie Kirk, his Uranus-Neptune conjunction. I mean, that says something about his beliefs and what he thought was important in his spirituality, because I know that he was an evangelical Christian. And so he kind of made that Uranus-Neptune conjunction personal. He enjoyed having an impact, a powerful impact. Uranus, getting people's attention, certain shock value that they're going to campuses and not being afraid of what happened. That's Uranus, and Neptune is about his beliefs. Whatever you think about those beliefs, and advocating for those beliefs. So him having that Uranus-Neptune conjunction, he is sensitive to that Uranus-Neptune cycle, and at the time of his killing, Uranus and Neptune were only 21 arc minutes apart. So I think that says a great deal about what happened. And we're not done with the Uranus-Neptune sextile. It is going to be around for on and off for some time. So thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.